My husband cheated with his business partner and stole $500, $0, then turned around and sued me for half the house in a bitter court battle over stolen property. I never saw it coming. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, staring at the mess my life has become. It all started with a gut feeling, something I shrugged off for months. You know how it is, little things that don't add up but you tell yourself you're overthinking. My wife seemed distant, more interested in her phone than in us. She'd cancel plans at the last minute, say she was busy with work, or just brush me off with a bitchy attitude. I figured maybe she was stressed, or maybe she was just tired of me. Honestly, I was trying to ignore it because I loved her, and I didn't want to believe she could betray me. Then came the night I discovered the truth, something I still can't believe I missed. I was working late at the office, finishing up some paperwork when I decided to check her phone. It's not like I was snooping, but something felt off. I'd caught her lying about her whereabouts before, and I'd seen her act sneaky, so I figured, what's the harm? I unlocked her phone and my stomach dropped. There were messages, flirty, explicit messages between her and her supposed best friend Lisa. But that wasn't the worst part. No, what really hit me like a freight train was the pictures. I saw her in bed with another guy, some guy named Jake, who I later found out was her boss's son. They were clearly having sex and she was totally into it. The worst part. The messages. She was bragging about how she was finally getting her real needs met, and how she loved the thrill of sneaking around behind my back. She called me boring and said I didn't know what she really wanted. I couldn't breathe. My head was spinning, my hands shaking. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I never thought my wife would cheat on me, especially with some kid she barely knew. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious all at once. How could she do this to me? After everything we built, after all the years, it was like my entire world was crashing down. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat on the couch staring at the phone, trying to process what I'd seen. I kept asking myself if I missed signs, if I was blind, or if I'd somehow driven her to this. But deep down I knew. She was cheating, and she had been for months. The betrayal was one thing, but the fact that she lied so much made me doubt everything. Our marriage, her love, even my own judgment. I felt like I was living someone else's nightmare. I knew I had to confront her, but I wasn't ready. I just sat there trying to hold it together, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The next day, I didn't even bother pretending I was okay. I went straight home from work, my mind racing, heart pounding like I'd run a marathon. I knew I couldn't keep this bottled up. When got home, she was her usual bitchy self, snapping at me for no reason, acting like I was the one overreacting. I kept my composure, barely, and told her I needed to talk. Her eyes narrowed and she rolled her eyes like I was wasting her time. I laid it out there, showed her the messages and pictures. Her face didn't change much, just a flicker of annoyance, then a shrug. She said, "You're overreacting, Dave. It's just sex, it doesn't mean anything. You're paranoid, seriously." That was her go-to excuse, just sex, like that made it okay. She claimed she was just bored, that Jake was a distraction, and insisted it wasn't serious. She tried to gaslight me, saying I was crazy for thinking she'd cheat on me over some dumb affair. But I wasn't buying it. I could see right through her lies. What really cut deep was her tone, so dismissive, like I was the one who was crazy for feeling hurt. She kept saying I was insecure, that I never paid enough attention, that I didn't understand her needs, that she was done with this little drama, and that I should just get over it. But I couldn't. I was furious, devastated, and humiliated all at once. How could she lie so easily? How could she cheat and then turn around and act like I was the problem? I felt like I'd been slapped across the face, and I knew this wasn't going to be something I could just forget about. After she stormed off into the bedroom, I sat on the couch trying to process everything. I thought about the life we'd built, our house, our savings, the plans for the future. All of it seemed so fragile now. I kept asking myself how I missed all the signs, how I didn't see her sneaking around. Was I blind? Or was she just that good at hiding it? I couldn't sleep that night either. I kept replaying the images, the words, the betrayal. It was like a sickness crawling under my skin. I knew I'd have to do something, but I didn't know what. I just knew that my entire trust had been shattered and I'd never look at her the same way again. The days that followed were a blur of anger, sadness, and confusion. I couldn't focus at work, couldn't sleep, and every time I looked at, I saw her differently, some stranger who had lied and cheated her way into my life. I kept asking myself if I should confront her again, push her for answers, or just pack up and leave. But deep down, I knew I needed a plan. I couldn't just let her walk all over me, not after what I'd seen and felt. One night, I decided to dig deeper. I started looking into her phone more thoroughly, trying to find out how long this had been going on, if there was more to it. I found bank statements and receipts that she'd hidden from me, little things, but enough to make me realize she'd been covering her tracks. Turns out, she had been meeting Jake at a hotel, sometimes twice a week, for months. I also found out she'd been draining our joint account, siphoning off money for her secret life. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just an affair. She was stealing from us, from our future, while pretending to be the perfect wife. I was furious. Not just because she cheated, but because she was so reckless about it. She stolen over $20, $0 in the past few months, and I had no idea. I felt betrayed on every level by her lies, her theft, and her total disregard for what we had. I knew I couldn't just confront her again and hope for honesty. I had to do something drastic. That's when I started planning my revenge. I reached out to a lawyer I knew, someone who specialized in property and financial disputes. I wanted to understand my rights, what I could do if I decided to divorce her, and how I could recover what she stole. I also started gathering evidence, screenshots, bank statements, everything that proved her betrayal and theft. I knew was the kind of woman who would lie her way out of anything, so I had to be prepared. I also decided I'd get a private investigator to follow her, see if she was still sneaking around or meeting Jake. I wanted to know exactly how deep her deception went before I made any move. Meanwhile, kept acting like nothing was wrong, throwing tantrums, calling me paranoid, accusing me of destroying her reputation. She even accused me of cheating, which made me laugh bitterly. I had never been unfaithful, and I knew she was the one sneaking around. But she was so caught up in her lies, she couldn't see that her world was crumbling. Every day, I felt more like a victim and less like a husband. I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep pretending. Everything was fine, but I knew I had to hold it together. I had to be smart, patient, and ready to fight for what was mine, my dignity, my money, and my future. The next couple of weeks were like living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I spent every spare moment digging into her finances, talking to the lawyer, and secretly hearing the private investigator. Of course, kept up her act, bitchy, dismissive, claiming I was crazy for suspecting her. She'd yell at me over the smallest thing, accuse me of trying to ruin her life, all while secretly sneaking around behind my back. I could tell she was getting nervous, maybe because she knew I was onto her, or maybe because she sensed I was planning something. One evening, I got the call I'd been waiting for. The investigator had followed her, and what he uncovered was even worse than I imagined. Had been meeting Jake at a fancy hotel downtown, sometimes twice a week. But it wasn't just that. She'd been funneling money into her sister's account, buying herself new designer clothes, and even secretly paying for a cosmetic procedure she'd always wanted. All behind my back, all with stolen money. It was like she was living a double life, and I was the fool who never saw it. That night, I sat her down and showed her everything. I laid out the evidence, the bank statements, the hotel receipts, the photos she never knew I had. Her face turned pale, then red with rage. She tried to deny everything, claiming the investigator was lying, that I was crazy, and that I was trying to ruin her reputation. But I wasn't buying her bullshit anymore. I told her I was done playing her game, that I knew she'd been stealing from us and cheating on me for months. I told her I was filing for divorce and that she'd better start packing her bags. Her reaction was pure fury. She screamed, called me a jealous idiot, and said I had no right to take what was hers. She even accused me of cheating on her, which made me laugh bitterly. The truth was, I was just tired of her lies, her manipulations, and her betrayal. I wanted out, and I wanted to make sure she paid for what she'd done. I told her she wasn't getting a dime of the money she stole, and I was going to fight her in court for everything, our house, the savings, everything. I was done being played for a fool. The next day, I went to see my lawyer, handed over all the evidence, and started the divorce process. I also filed a claim to recover the stolen money, knowing I had a solid case. Of course, tried to spin it all, blamed me for destroying her life, said I was controlling, and accused me of abandoning her. But I didn't care anymore. I knew the truth, and I knew I was doing what was right. I was finally taking back control of my life, even if it meant ending the only relationship I ever truly believed in. The betrayal cut so deep, but I was determined to make her pay, not just financially but emotionally as well. I wanted her to understand that her lies and theft had consequences, and honestly, I was just glad I was finally free from her games. The court proceedings were a nightmare, but I knew I had to see it through. Fought me every step of the way, trying to spin her lies and deny everything, but I had enough proof to bury her in court. She claimed I was a controlling husband, that she was forced into her actions because I was boring and absent. But the judge didn't buy her bullshit. The evidence was overwhelming: texts, bank statements, hotel receipts, and I had witnesses ready to testify about her secret meetings and stolen money. The thing that really surprised me was how bitter she became once the case started to turn against her. She accused me of being jealous, said I was trying to ruin her reputation. But all I cared about was getting what was rightfully mine: our house, the money she stole, and some kind of justice for the betrayal. It was a long, exhausting process, but I was determined to see it through. I wanted her to know that her lies had consequences, that she couldn't just cheat and steal without paying the price. Finally, the judge ruled in my favor. She was ordered to pay back the stolen money, and I got the house in the settlement. Was furious, screaming at the top of her lungs in court, calling me every name in the book. She even tried to threaten me with lawsuits, but I had everything documented. I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Relief that I finally won, but also a hollow ache because I had lost my wife, the person I thought I knew. All those years, all the plans we made, gone in an instant. After the court case, I moved out of the house. It was strange walking away from everything we'd built, packing up her things, seeing her face in my mind, knowing she'd betrayed me so badly. I felt betrayed, angry, and somehow relieved all at once. I knew I'd never trust her again, and honestly, I didn't want to. That chapter of my life was over, and I was starting to see a future where I could finally breathe again. I knew I'd have to rebuild, but I was ready. I'd learned a hard lesson: trust is fragile, and some people will lie, cheat, and steal their way through your life if you let them. But I also learned that standing up for yourself, no matter how painful, is the only way to truly move on. In the end, I realized that betrayal cuts deeper than I ever thought possible, but it also teaches you something about yourself. I never thought I'd be the guy to go through something like this: losing my wife, fighting for my money, rebuilding from scratch, but I did it. I stood my ground, gathered my evidence, and fought for what was mine. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about reclaiming my dignity. Lies and betrayal almost broke me, but I refused to let her win. Looking back, I see the warning signs now that I didn't see then. I was blind to her manipulations, blinded by love and hope. I trusted her too much, and she took advantage of that. But I also see how I grew stronger because of it. I learned to be cautious, to pay attention to the red flags, and to never let someone's words or actions go unchecked. I learned that sometimes the only way to get justice is to fight for it, even if it costs everything you thought you had. Now I'm rebuilding my life. I've started focusing on myself, my health, my career, my future. The pain is still there, but it's less raw. I've come to terms with the fact that some people are just not worth the trouble, and that true happiness comes from within, not from someone who's willing to betray you for their own selfish needs. I want anyone out there who's going through something similar to know this. Don't stay quiet. Don't let betrayal define you. Stand up, fight for yourself, and never let anyone take away your dignity. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: trust is earned, not given blindly. And if someone shows you they're not worthy of that trust, walk away. Because life's too short to waste on people who lie, cheat, and steal. I'm still healing, still moving forward, but I feel stronger than I ever have. Betrayal hurts, but it also clears the way for something better, and I know I'll find it.